Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, or welcome to my channel. My name is Patrick, and I like to talk about things. I like to talk about things that I find interesting. Today, our topic is the Russian sleep experiment. If you're older than 10, you've probably heard of it before. I remember being back in school, being absolutely terrified because I thought that this thing was actually real. It kept me up for weeks, just having nightmares about what might be out there. It is not real. Let that be a lesson to you. But there is, I do have to put a disclaimer in here for body horror, blood, gore. So just be wary of it if you can't stomach things like this. It was written in 2010 by an unknown writer going by the name Orange Soda. Let's dive right into it. We're going to talk first about sleep deprivation in general and some of the records that have been held by people over the years, and then we're going to talk specifically about the Russian sleep experiment. I hope you enjoyed the video. Now, I think it goes without saying that going prolonged periods of time without sleep, or with less sleep than recommended, can have detrimental effects to your health. We're talking impaired cognitive functions, mood disturbances, increased risks for even chronic conditions like obesity, diabetes, and cardiovascular diseases. But what doctors don't want you to know is that you spend over a third of your life sleeping. That is a waste of time and a waste of hours that could be spent doing something actually useful. So how do we turn those hours into actually useful time? That's what we're going to talk about today, is the people who have done that and the people who have succeeded. First, we're going to talk about Randy Gardner. Now, Randy Gardner is a notorious record holder for longest time without sleep. Between December 1963 and January of 1964, he was 17 and he stayed awake for 11 days and 24 minutes, or about 264 hours. I'm just seeing December 1963, January 1964. Do you think his friends were like, "Oh, you've been awake since last year"? I would totally say that, 100%. So his record was broken multiple times until about 1997, when Guinness World Records stopped doing it because people were having some, of course, health effects from staying asleep for over 2 weeks. At that point, a record was held by Robert McDonald. He stayed awake for 18 days and 21 hours, about 453 hours and 40 minutes, which is an insane length of time. Of course, he was closely monitored by doctors for the entire duration to make sure that he didn't actually end up doing what's called micronaps, which are just spots where kind of your brain and your body take over and force you to sleep for a couple minutes or a couple seconds at a time without your control. So what they do is they hook up some diodes to your brain, make sure that your body doesn't actually force you to go to sleep for those couple seconds, because that would, of course, restart the clock. So the reason that Randy Gardner is so widely talked about in terms of sleep deprivation and the studies from it is by how closely he was monitored. He had all those diodes on his head, and his sleep recovery, even after the experiment, was closely observed by the same sleep researchers who noticed, of course, the changes in sleep structure after he went through the ordeal of the experiment. Right after completing the record, he slept for almost 15 hours straight, awoke naturally at 8:40 p.m., and then stayed awake until 7:30 p.m. the next day, almost a full 24 hours, which then he slept an additional 10 and a half hours. He appeared at that point to have fully recovered from loss of sleep, with follow-up sleep recordings taken 1 week, 6 weeks, and 10 weeks later, and of course he showed no significant difference. However, so it turns out that after about 40 years, though, after the experiment was over, he ended up having some serious insomnia, which it could be the fact that he was around 60 years old at the time. or because of the effects of the experiment that he had taken almost 40 years ago. But he blames the study, of course. A couple other noteworthy people. There is a woman named Maureen Weston, who in England in 1977 stayed awake for about 449 hours straight during a rocking chair marathon, which is the most grandma thing I have ever heard of, but that's awesome. Being able to stay awake for almost 450 hours straight. Just rocking a chair. So just to reassure, there is plenty of evidence that people can stay awake for over 2 weeks at a time with absolutely no long-term side effects. So with that knowledge, of course, let's then jump into the insane graphic horror of the Russian sleep experiment. Russian researchers in the late 1940s kept 5 political enemies of the state awake for 15 days using an experimental gas-based stimulant. They were kept in a sealed environment to carefully monitor their oxygen intake so the gas didn't kill them, since it was toxic in high concentrations. This, of course, was before closed-circuit cameras, so they only had microphones and 5-inch thick glass portholes into the chamber to monitor them. The chamber was stocked with books and cots, but no bedding, as well as running water, a toilet, and enough dried food to last over a month. Everything was fine for the first 5 days. The subjects hardly complained, having been promised falsely that they would be freed if they submitted to the test and did not sleep for 30 days straight. Their conversations and activities were monitored, and it was noted that they continued to talk about increasingly traumatic incidents from their past. The general tone of their conversations took on a darker aspect after the 4-day mark. After 5 days, they started to complain about the circumstances and the events that led them to where they were, and started to demonstrate severe paranoia. They stopped talking to each other and began alternately whispering into the microphones and the one-way mirrored portholes. Oddly, they all seemed to think that they could win the trust of the experimenters by turning over their comrades, the other subjects in captivity with them. At first, the researchers suspected that this was an effect of the gas itself. After 9 days, the first of them started screaming. He ran the length of the chamber repeatedly, yelling at the top of his lungs for 3 hours straight, at which point he continued attempting to scream, but was only able to produce occasional squeaks. The researchers postulated that he had physically torn his vocal cords. The most surprising thing about this was how the other captives reacted to it, or more accurately, didn't react to it. They continued whispering into the microphones until the second of the captives started to scream. The 2 non-screaming captives took the books, tore out pages, and smeared page after page with their own feces, pastering them calmly over the glass portholes. The screaming promptly stopped. Also, the whispering stopped too. After 3 more days, the researchers checked the microphones hourly to make sure they were working, since they had thought it was impossible that no sound could be occurring with 5 people inside the chamber. The oxygen consumption in the chamber indicated that all 5 must still be alive. In fact, it was the amount of oxygen that 5 people would consume at a very heavy level of intense exercise. On the morning of the 14th day, the researchers did something that they said they wouldn't do to get a reaction from the captives. They used the intercom inside the chamber, hoping to provoke any kind of response from the people they were afraid were either dead or vegetables. They announced, "We are opening the chamber to test the microphones. Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor or you will be shot. Compliance will earn one of you your immediate freedom." To their surprise, they heard a calm voice respond in a single phrase. "We no longer want to be freed." Of course, all the researchers and military forces started arguing about being able to still fund the research, unable to provoke any more responses from the intercom, it was finally decided to open the chamber on midnight of the 15th day. The chamber was flushed of the stimulant gas and filled with fresh air, and immediately voices from the microphones began to object. 3 different voices began begging, as if pleading for the life of their loved ones, to turn the gas back on. The chamber was opened and soldiers were sent in to retrieve the test subjects. They began to scream louder than ever, and so did the soldiers when they saw what was inside. Now, 4 of the 5 subjects were still alive, although no one could really rightly call the state that any of them were in alive. The food rations past day 5 had not been touched. There were chunks of meat from the dead test subject's thighs and chest stuffed into the drain in the center of the chamber, blocking it and allowing 4 inches of water to accumulate on the floor. Precisely how much of the water was blood was never determined. All 4 surviving test subjects also had large portions of muscle and skin torn away from their bodies. The destruction of flesh and exposed bone on their fingertips indicated that the wounds were inflicted by hand, not with teeth as some of the researchers thought. Closer examination of the position and angles of the wounds indicated that most, if not all of them, were self-inflicted. The abdominal organs below the ribcage of all 4 test subjects had been removed. While the heart, lungs, and diaphragm remained in place, the skin and most of the muscles attached to the ribs had been ripped off, exposing the lungs through the ribcage. All of the blood vessels and organs remained intact, but had been taken out and laid on the floor, fanning out around the eviscerated but still living bodies of the subjects. The digestive tract of all 4 could be seen to be working, digesting food. It quickly became apparent that what they were digesting was their own flesh that had been ripped off and eaten over the course of the few days. Most of the soldiers were Russian special operatives at the facility, but still many refused to return to the chamber to remove the test subjects. The subjects themselves continued to scream to be left in the chamber and begged and demanded that the gas be turned back on. They did not want to fall asleep. To everyone's complete surprise, the test subjects put up a very fierce fight in the process of being removed from the chamber. One of the Russian soldiers died from having their throat ripped out, and another was gravely injured by having his testicles ripped off and an artery in his leg severed by one of the subject's teeth. Another 5 of the soldiers lost their lives, if you count the ones that committed suicide in the days following the incident. In the struggle, one of the 4 living test subjects had his spleen ruptured and bled out almost immediately. The medical researchers attempted to sedate him, but this proved impossible. He was injected with more than 10 times the human dose of morphine derivative and still fought like a cornered animal, breaking the ribs and arm of one doctor. His heart was seen to beat for a full 2 minutes after he had bled out, to the point that there was more air in his vascular system than blood. Even after it stopped, he continued to scream and flail for another 3 minutes, struggling to attack anyone in reach and just repeating the word "more" over and over, weaker and weaker, until he finally fell silent. The surviving 3 test subjects were heavily restrained and moved to a medical facility. The 2 with intact vocal cords continuously begged for the gas, demanding to be kept awake. The most injured of the 3 was taken to the only surgical operating room that the facility had. In the process of preparing the subject to have his organs placed back in his body, it was found that he was effectively immune to the sedative that they had given him to prepare him for the surgery. He fought furiously against his restraints when the anesthetic gas was brought out to put him under. He managed to tear most of the way through a 4-inch wide leather strap on one wrist, even though the weight of a 200-pound soldier held that wrist. It only took a little more anesthetic than normal to put him under, and the instant his eyelids fluttered and closed, his heart stopped. In the autopsy of the test subjects that died on the operating table, it was found that his blood had triple the normal level of oxygen. The muscles that were still attached to his skeleton were badly torn, and he had broken 9 bones in the struggle to not be subdued. Most of them were from the force that his own muscles put on his bones. The second survivor had been the first of the group to start screaming. His vocal cords were destroyed, so he was unable to beg for the gas or to object to the surgery, and he only reacted by shaking his head violently in disapproval when the anesthetic gas was brought near him. He shook his head yes when someone suggested reluctantly that they should try the surgery without anesthetic, and he did not react for the entire 6-hour procedure of replacing his organs and attempting to cover them with what remained of his skin. The presiding surgeon stated repeatedly that it should not be medically possible for the patient to still be alive. One terrified nurse assisting the surgery stated that she had seen the patient's mouth curl into a smile several times whenever his eyes met hers. When the surgery ended, the subject looked at the surgeon and began to wheeze loudly, attempting to talk while struggling. Assuming that this must be of some drastic importance, the surgeon handed the patient a pen and a pad, and he attempted to write his message. It was simple: keep cutting. The other 2 test subjects were given the same surgery, both without anesthetic as well, although they had to be injected with a paralytic to keep them from fighting during the duration of the operation. The surgeon found it impossible to perform the operation while the patients laughed continuously. Once paralyzed, the subjects could only follow the attending researchers with their eyes. The paralytic cleared their system in an abnormally short period of time, and they were soon trying to escape their bonds again. The moment they could speak, they were asking again for the stimulant gas. The researchers tried asking why they had injured themselves, why they had ripped out their own guts, and why they wanted to be given the gas again. Only one response was given: I must remain awake. All 3 subjects' restraints were reinforced, and they were placed back in the chamber, awaiting determination for what should be done with them. The researchers, facing the wrath of their military benefactors for having failed the stated goals of their experiment, considered euthanizing the surviving subjects. The commanding officer, an ex-KGB, instead saw some potential and wanted to see what would happen if they were put back on the gas. The researchers, of course, strongly objected, but they were overruled. In preparation for being sealed back in the chamber, the subjects were connected to an EEG monitor and had their restraints padded for long-term confinement. To everyone's surprise, all 3 stopped struggling the moment it was let slip that they were going back on the gas. It was obvious that at this point, all 3 of them were putting up a great deal of struggle to stay awake. One of the subjects that could speak was humming loudly and continuously. The mute subject was straining his legs against the leather bonds with all his might, first left, and then right, and then left again for something to focus on. The remaining subject was holding his head off of his pillow and blinking rapidly. Having been the first to be wired to the EEG machine, most of the researchers were monitoring his brainwaves in surprise. They were normal most of the time, but sometimes they flatlined inexplicably. It looked as if he were repeatedly suffering brain death and then returning to normal. As they focused on paper scrolling out of the brainwave monitor, only one nurse saw the man's eyes slip shut at the same moment his head hit the pillow. His brainwaves immediately changed to that of deep sleep, and then flatlined for the last time as his heart simultaneously stopped. The only remaining subject that could speak started screaming to be sealed in now. His brainwaves showed the same flat lines as the one who had just died from falling asleep. The commander gave the order to seal the chamber with both subjects inside, as well as 3 researchers. One of the named 3 immediately drew his gun, shot the commander point blank between the eyes, then turned the gun on the mute subject and blew his brains out as well. He pointed his gun at the remaining subject, still restrained to a bed, as the remaining members of the medical and research team fled the room. I won't be locked in here with these things. Not with you, he screamed at the man strapped at the table. What are you? He demanded. I must know. The subject smiled. Have you forgotten so easily? The subject asked. We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be freed at every moment in your deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go to the nocturnal haven where we cannot tread. The researcher paused, then aimed at the subject's heart and fired. The EEG flatlined as the subject weakly choked out. So nearly free. Now, of course, this isn't real. None of this actually happened. It's all an urban legend. I mean, there were some experiments done on prisoners of war back in World War II, of course, but nothing ever was documented about a fake toxic gas that keeps people from going to sleep. And nothing of this magnitude or anything even close to this. Of course, there are some theories about what this story can mean. Some people think that in this universe, whenever you go to sleep, there's some kind of demon that takes over your body, but since you are asleep, your body can't do anything for it. When you sleep, that kind of resets the clock to what they can take over. I myself just think that they went bonkers. It's a very good spooky story. It's a story meant to terrify kids, meant to terrify people, meant to make them think, meant to make people go to sleep, I guess. Let me know what you think about in the comments. Of course, this is a wild story. If you've got any other topics you want me to cover, I've got a couple more videos planned for going forward. I've got an insane list that my wife typed up for me. I've been contemplating going over the burger entries. I just listened to that Creepcast episode, and that was it started out pretty cool, but later on it gets a little wacky. So if you guys want me to read through those, let me know. I'll do it. And like I said before, maybe some popular topics tossed in there as well. I might talk about Ryan's world, because there's some crazy stuff going on between him and his family. There's plenty of topics. So if there's something that you want me to talk about, let me know. Put it in the comments. I'll do some research, throw something together to present to you guys. Thank you, all of you, for supporting me continuously. I really appreciate it. This is, of course, my dream, is to get paid to just talk to you guys. So thank you for supporting. Thank you for liking videos. Thank you for commenting, of course. I'll try to keep interacting with you guys in the comments. I really, really like that. I'm trying to build a community here, and I like that you guys are replying to me. So keep going on it. Talk about me to your friends. You guys are great. Thank you. Thank you guys for watching. It means the world. Have a good one.